My name is Torri. I'm from California, Los Angeles, Santa Monica to be specific. I'm born and raised California, but I've traveled a lot around the US, Canada, Australia, UK, and Europe. I am the president, co-founder, and executive director of Tangible Movement. We're a 501c3 nonprofit corporation that was founded to basically help inspire, educate, and provide support for youth and young adults who are struggling from addiction, depression, sexual and gender identity issues, and abuse. So I'm going to go ahead and just give you some disclosures. I am not a doctor, okay? I'm not a clinician. You guys will hear, I have some facts and figures that I've compiled for my foundation, as well as my personal story of dealing with all of the things I just mentioned, which is exactly why I started the foundation in the first place. My aim through the foundation is to go to as many schools and universities and mental health conferences to spread awareness and to help end the stigma of mental illness and to bring to light the LGBTQ issues as far as, depression, suicide rates, and all that kind of stuff, and kind of give the youth, a voice per se, so they know that there is a solution and there are other people who have gone through things that they are going through, and the tools and resources that they may not know about. I kind of bring that to light as well. So that's what I do. I'm going to show you a quick clip of what Tangible Movement is and some facts and figures on there. Hi, my name is Torri. I'm the president and founder of Tangible Movement. We are a 501c3 nonprofit corporation that was formed to inspire, educate, and provide support for youth and young adults who are suffering from addiction, depression, sexual and gender identity issues, and abuse. I want to come into your school to help your students understand that you can live with mental illness and it is okay to be mentally ill. I want to defeat the stigma of mental illness and everything that goes along with it. Sexual and gender identity issues, suffering from abuse. Worldwide, 10 to 20% of young people are diagnosed mentally ill. Half of all mental illness begins at age 14 and 3/4 by their mid-20s. 30% of teens who are diagnosed depressed will also develop a substance abuse problem. Teens who are depressed are also 12 times more likely to attempt suicide. 18% of gay, lesbian, and bisexual students have reported being raped at some point in their life. That is 3 times the likelihood of their straight counterparts. 30% of gay, lesbian, and bisexual students have attempted suicide. That is 4 times the likelihood of their straight counterparts. And 60% have reported feeling sad or hopeless at some point in their life. That is twice the rate of their straight counterparts. I am the statistic. At age 14, I was diagnosed severely depressed. At age 14, I started using drugs and alcohol. At age 14, I started cutting. And at age 15, I was admitted to my first psychiatric institution for attempted suicide. At age 17, I was admitted to my first rehabilitation center for drugs and alcohol abuse. And the saga continued because I was not willing to accept the fact that I was mentally ill. So I used drugs and alcohol to cover up how I was feeling inside. And I know your students are going through the same thing. I want to help your students by giving them tools and resources so that they don't feel like they are alone. And so they know that there is a solution out there. There is help for them. My name is Torri. I am with Tangible Movement. Please help me end the stigma of mental illness. And visit www.tangiblemovement.org to book me today. Thank you. Okay, so the presentation is on depressive disorders in children and adolescents. Wow, room filled up. I didn't even notice y'all come in. Welcome. Okay, so I'll open it up for questions and answers at the end. This presentation was actually made for an hour and a half, so I'm going to speed right through it. I've talked really fast anyway, so it should be okay, but let's go ahead and get through this, and then I'll be able to talk a little bit about my story, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So on the agenda today, what is depression, the scope of the problem, diagnostic dilemmas, causal mode, predisposing, precipitating, perpetuating, adolescence as a risk factor, assessment, treatment, recent facts and figures. So what is depression? And again, since this room is filled up, just out of curiosity, clinicians, raise your hand. Have an idea? Okay. So the people who are just joining, I want to give this disclosure as well. I'm not a clinician, okay? I'm not a doctor of any sort. I just happen to deal with all of the things that you guys treat, and I'm a survivor, basically. So this is my story, and my foundation is based on all the data that I'm going to be going over, okay? So bear with me if you guys think that some things don't, maybe you have different figures and facts, but there's just a lot of information out there. Depressed mood, irritability, presence of subset of other symptoms, sleep or appetite disturbances, morbid ideation, suicidality, decreased energy, difficulties concentrating, making decisions, hopelessness, down on self. The symptoms which occur together persist for at least 2 weeks and are associated with a significant loss of ability to function. Other depressive disorders, dysthymia, adjustment disorder with depressed mood. There's a mounting body of evidence that suggests that depression differs from normal experience in degree rather than in type. Major depression appears to be quantitative variation of normal functioning and the use of continuous versus categorical assessment approaches. So when is depression? So some people just get sad, right? And some people actually experience depression. What I've noticed in the youth is that they don't really know the difference. So persistent versus transient symptoms. 79% persistence in recent study of 8th graders assessed via self-report in a school setting at 4-week intervals. The youth with subclinical symptoms at increased risk for subsequent depression and adverse outcomes. Experiencing a first episode of depression increases the likelihood of recurrence and continuation into adult life. The scope of the problem. There's a 1-year prevalence rate of 2%. Adolescents have a 1-year prevalence rate of 4% to 8%. The National Comorbidity Study, 6.1% in 15 to 24-year-olds. A lifetime prevalence up to 18, which was shown in my video, 15% to 20%. 65% of adolescents report some depressive symptoms. 65. I know that's probably a little bit higher since the study came out, but that's insane. 5 to 10% of youth have symptoms, considerable psychological impairment, high family loading for depression, and an increased risk for suicide and developing major depressive disorder. So the mean length of an episode lasts 7 to 9 months. 6% to 10% become protracted. The reoccurrence is 30 to 50%, and approximately 20% develop bipolar disorder. Associated with significant comorbidity, functional impairment, risk for suicide, and substance abuse. So as far as the bipolar part, I'm going to cover a little bit of that. I was diagnosed bipolar when I was very young, and I had a father who believed my father's father was a psychiatrist. So of course he's a professional in diagnosing mental illness, right? He actually lived on the hospital grounds of Patton State Hospital. It's a hospital out in California. He believed that the diagnosis of bipolar is horrible, and you're crazy, and you're not a functioning member of society. So when the doctors would diagnose me as bipolar, my father would be like, no, you're not taking that medication because you're not bipolar, because my daughter is not going to be a bipolar. So I struggled with that for many, many years, overcoming the stigma of my own mental illness because of the fact that my own family was putting that stigma on me, basically. Diagnostic dilemmas. 40 to 90% have a comorbid disorder, whether that's anxiety, substance abuse, disruptive disorders. 43% of depressed youth had at least one other concurrent diagnosis, most commonly anxiety at 18%. Major depressive disorder presents after anxiety and disruptive disorder, substance abuse second to depression. So here we go, depressive disorders. Adults, 15 to 20%. It's a 2-to-1 female to male ratio. And it changes as the ages go. So at age 11, males are greater than females. At age 13, males are more equal to females as far as the diagnosis and the depressive disorder is concerned. Can you guys see okay? Okay. Age 15, 18, and 21, this is where females become greater than males as far as the disorder is concerned. So why are adolescents so vulnerable? I mean, I think we can kind of guess, right? But Early adolescence, puberty stimulates changes in the brain, systems regulating arousal and appetite that influence intensity of emotion and motivation. And then we go to middle adolescence. Adolescent emotional and behavioral problems second to poor regulation skills, particularly when there's a gap between puberty arousal and consolidation of cognitive skills. And then late adolescence. With age and experience comes maturation of the frontal lobes, which facilitates regulatory competency. So there's a little bit of a cycle there. Now this is for the clinicians in here, as far as the assessments are concerned. I mean, it's the most important aspect of your job, I would say. And so, obviously do an assessment before making a treatment plan. Look at the family perspective, obviously, and the behaviors. That's all pretty much basic knowledge, 101, therapy. Assessment tools. So raise the adolescent's awareness of issue as a possible concern. When I first started going to therapy, I was 14, and I was struggling with my sexuality. So I grew up in Orange County, California. I'm not sure if you are all aware of that area. It's pretty conservative for a California area. Most of California is pretty liberal. It's very conservative, very white, no diversity, and no gay people. Okay? So, and my dad was an extreme bigot. I grew up in an extremely racist household. He didn't like anything that wasn't white, and he especially did not like gay people. So when I went to therapy, I was dealing with depression and my sexual issues. The therapist said, okay, well, we're just going to take your sexuality and put that on the back burner. And my mom went through the roof. So they argued, and she's like, well, this is kind of the reason why she's probably depressed. No. We're going to treat the depression and just put the sexuality in the back burner. So as clinicians, don't do that. Okay? It's a pretty big deal, if someone's 14 years old says, I think they may have feelings for the same sex, don't ignore it. I'm sure I'm positive today is much different, but I'm a little bit older than I look. I'll be 40 in July. I take a lot of naps. I drink a lot of water. Okay? And my addiction was mostly pills. So I saved my face by not drinking so much alcohol. So yes, obviously let the adolescents know the issues and that they can be brought up and make it a safe place for them. Let them speak. Sort out the parent-youth conceptualization of the problem. Talk about what treatment will be useful. Talk about hopeless depression, the age of onset, ADHD, or other comorbidities. Talk about the parental mental health concerns, abuse, neglect, reinforcement for illness behavior, unresolved grief. School issues, obviously, learning disability, attendance problems, harassment, isolation, and of course, social media, which is huge, and bullying, which I get down to there. Yeah, the pregnancy, sexual pressure, breakups, all that stuff that teens deal with. Therapy treatment, CBT is the most widely investigated psychotherapy for depression. You can change how you feel by changing the way you think. I'm not really going to get much into this because I'm not a therapist. Okay, so we're going to go right past that. Okay, boom. And then also interpersonal psychotherapy, which obviously we all know about. I'm sure many of us have been in it. If you are not a clinician, I'm sure we've all been to therapy, talk therapy. The here and now treatment, focused, time-limited treatment. Obviously, the basics: supportive listening, optimistic stance, encouragement of affect, details, exploring options, role-playing, and the use of the therapeutic relationship. Obviously, there's also the discussion of medication, which I'm not going to get into because I'm not a doctor. I can speak to my own personal experience with medication. I probably could be a psychiatrist. With the amount of medications I've been on since I was 14 years old, it's probably the majority of them. And except for the brand new ones that are out with the commercials that you see, I haven't tried those ones, but I've been on just about every other one you could possibly imagine. So if you need to know any side effects to any medication, just let me know. I can definitely tell you. Life events associated with the depression. So probe for changes in family structure, changes in school, moves, death, illness, accident, or trauma, onset of sexuality and sexual relationships. Establish a time frame and sequence of events relating to the depression. Obviously, social media influence and bullying. Okay, common developmental issues for adolescents: the separation from parents, internet and social media, exploration of authority in relationship to parents, development of didactic interpersonal relationships with members of the opposite sex or same sex, gender identity issues, homosexuality, initial experience with death of a relative or friend, peer pressure or bullying. Okay, so we're gonna get into some facts and figures, but before we go that, for the clinician, like, I understand how difficult your job is. As far as me being having comorbid issues, with substance abuse and suffering from depression, it was very difficult for me to get an accurate diagnosis, because obviously I was presenting symptoms of one thing, but really it was more my alcoholism while I was using, and of course I was using to self-medicate to get over my depression. So it took many years for me to accept the fact that I was mentally ill and had the type of depression that I have. And I'll get into that too a little bit later. So these are recent facts and figures via the mentalhealthofamerica.org. So youth with at least one past year major depressive episode. 11% of youth aged 12 to 17 report suffering from at least one major depressive episode in the past year. Major depression is marked by a significant and pervasive feeling of sadness that's associated with suicidal thoughts and impair a young person's ability to concentrate or engage in normal activities. There's a significant increase in the number of depressed youth across the country over time. And the state prevalence of youth with MDE ranges from Washington, D.C. at 8.69% to Oregon at 14.62%. Does anybody have any questions before I continue? I'm going to have an open question and answer period, but I know that some people might have something they'll forget. Anything so far? No? Okay. So 1.8 million youth experience severe depression. That's a pretty big number. These youth experience very serious interference in school, home, and in relationships. The state prevalence of youth with severe MDE ranges from 5.2% in North Dakota to 10.7% in Oregon. Youth with dependence or abuse of illicit drugs or alcohol. 5% of youth in America report having a substance use or alcohol problem. Much higher, obviously. This is just what's reported. So this is a low number based on the data that is able to be obtained. I don't know if I agree with this, but this is what they came up with, that substance uses are going down throughout the country over time. I don't know about that. I don't think so. I don't know where they got that information from, but the state prevalence of youth alcohol and substance use ranges from 4% in Oklahoma to 6% in Colorado. This is staggering. 64% of youth with major depression do not receive any mental health treatment whatsoever. And that's kind of my reason and goal for doing what I do, is I want to enlighten the youth. A lot of these people are cutting, they're feeling a certain type of way, and they don't understand that what they're dealing with is a chemical imbalance, is depression. They just are isolating, not sure, and certainly don't want to talk to an adult or a therapist or a counselor about it. So I'm trying to be that person that's like, okay, I can relate to you. Like, let's talk about it. Let me open up a dialogue. Let's get into a little breakout session at the schools and discuss what's really going on. So 6 out of 10 young people have depression who are at the most risk of suicidal thoughts, difficulty in school, and difficulty in relationships. They do not get the treatment needed to support them. And so 42% is the low New Hampshire. So Arkansas, 77% of the youth in Arkansas do not get treatment. Well, it's Arkansas. What do you expect, I guess, right? Youth with severe MDE who received some consistent treatment. Nationally, only 21% of youth with severe depression receive some consistent treatment. And that would be 7 to 25 visits a year. That has to change. We all have to do a better job of opening up ourselves to the youth and getting them some help. So people with severe major depression, 62% did not receive any mental health treatment. The state prevalence of youth with severe depression who received some outpatient treatment ranges from 39.5% in South Dakota to 9.4% in Nevada. So there's a huge divide. Okay. NIMH 2015 stats. Obviously, teen depression is a common problem. Approximately 20% of teens will experience depressed feelings before they reach adulthood. Between 10 to 15% of teenagers have some symptoms of depression at any one time. Depression increases a teen's risk for attempting suicide by 12 times. And 30% of teens with depression also develop a substance abuse problem. Depressed teens usually have a smaller social circle and take advantage of fewer career and educational opportunities. And depressed teens are more likely to have trouble at school and in jobs and to struggle with relationships. Suicide is the third leading cause of death for young people aged 15 to 24. About 20% of all teens experience depression before they reach adulthood. Between 10 to 15% suffer from symptoms at any one time. This is really interesting. California's largest school district, Los Angeles Unified, tallied more than 5,000 incidents of suicidal behavior last year. That is just, this is a brand new study. They just started coming out with a study. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but you should look it up. It's staggering. It's a huge increase since when they began tracking the issues back in 2010 and 2011, when only 255 incidents reported. 255 to 5,000. Crazy. So, like I said, we have some work to do for sure. This is the end of this part of the presentation. I have a little bit more to talk about, but I'll leave that up there for you guys. So like I said, I am the statistic, and I'll talk to you a little bit about my journey as far as being a depressed, substance abusing youth and how that's affected me in my adulthood. So I was basically born drunk. My mom had an alcohol problem. She drank throughout my pregnancy, but I don't think very much. I'm not really sure. She's also told me I need to tell every single doctor that I visit that I was born with my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck and was suffocated at birth. Maybe that has something to do with my ADHD. I don't know, or depression. I don't know. But I started having feelings that were not okay probably around the age of 13. I got into a lot of trouble when I was, just all throughout my life. So I was raised Jewish. My dad sent me to a Catholic high school because he thought the nuns could handle me better and give me a good ass whooping, when I needed it. There's a lot of rich kids at that school. We were well off, but definitely not rich. So I decided to do an entrepreneurial venture and start dealing drugs to all the rich kids. That was my first job, my first entrepreneurial job. I've been a hustler ever since. Okay, so I guess I can yay for drug dealing. It started out with marijuana. I remember my first drink. My first real drunk was at age 14. I was a freshman. It was a Mickey's malt liquor. And I remember the feeling coming over me of being finally being okay, feeling okay in my skin. Everything just faded away, and it was like this magical, drink. We were partying on a golf course, and there was this grass hill. I just opened my arms, and I just rolled down this hill just because I just felt so free. My mind shut down. I wasn't struggling. I wasn't battling with myself. It was wonderful. I'm like, okay, I need to be like this all the time. This is my medicine. This is it. I discovered marijuana. I was like, this is even better. Great. I love this stuff. I'm going to sell it and make a lot of money. I didn't make a lot of money because I smoked most of it. But I got better as I grew. My entrepreneurial ways got a little bit better. But this is a pretty conservative part of America, I believe. So I might offend some people in here, but I'll try not to. So, my dad's very conservative. I was never allowed to have boys in the house. I was never allowed to have them in my room. They always had to come to the door and meet him first. I was never allowed to call boys, right? At all. So I told him I thought that I might be gay. His response was, "You just haven't had enough dick yet." I was like, "Oh, is that what it is? That's gonna save me?" I'm like, "Okay." But that was the response. And so that's kind of what I grew up with. And I had developed crushes on my friends, and it was just not okay to be gay in Orange County, California, and within my family. So I had envisioned a white picket fence, just because that was what I was told. You grow up, you become a lawyer or a doctor, and you have a white picket fence and a house with 2 kids and a dog. Well, it just kind of, everything was blown away for me. So I'm like, okay, well, clearly I cannot live on this planet, because where do I fit in? So I started cutting, and that didn't work, so then I attempted suicide at age 14 or 15. That was my first time institutionalized. And I was put on more antidepressants. And when I got out a couple of years later, I moved on to bigger and better things, which was meth and speed, and I was dealing in that as well. I was kicked out of my high school, my Catholic high school, because I punched the dean in the face. Started dealing drugs. I ended up getting back into that high school because I told them I had dealt with my anger issues through poetry. And they believed the bullshit. I'm a major bullshit artist, and they took it. So, and most youth who struggle with depression and alcoholism, we are really good at the bullshit. So it's really hard to read through it. So yeah, I got back in. I didn't actually get to walk on my graduation because I thought it would be really funny to throw a bunch of paint on some teachers. I was just out of control. And there were so many signs, as far as my depression is concerned and being bipolar, that was just ridiculous that I wasn't properly treated then. So I ended up going to college in Santa Barbara. Does anybody know where Santa Barbara is? Santa Barbara? I was functioning. I was a functioning addict at this time. I was medicated, but it wasn't right. It was just it was major depression. It wasn't for bipolar. So I was self-medicating still with, this time now medication, Ritalin, Ambien, Klonopin, Xanax, and I would just mix all those together and try to get my balance all throughout the day. Oh, and opiates. I was a major opiate addict. I managed to keep myself together. I ended up serving an internship in the White House in 1998 under President Clinton. And I ended up graduating my class magna cum laude, top of my class. So I'm not dumb. I just have a little bit of a brain problem. I ended up starting my own company out of college. It was a mortgage real estate company. I made a ridiculous amount of money selling loans that should not have been sold at all. And as a result of the market, I lost everything, went bankrupt. And it was also because of my using and my drinking. Once the market crashed, I was a small broker, so I went out of business pretty quickly. I had an office in Orange County, an office in Beverly Hills, and a call center out in India, and this is in my 20s. And I was using heavily prescription medication. This is where I was all prescription now, and drinking. When the market crashed, I was like, oh, no, Wall Street will go ahead and open the floodgates again. They're just really scared right now. And I just kind of ran amok for 6 months, using and just ignoring all my responsibilities. And so I lost all the savings that I had. My overhead was in excess of $30,000 a month. So, you do the math, with no money coming in, it kind of goes out really quickly. So I went bankrupt and got into the fitness business. What happened was I was taking classes at this place called Barry's Boot Camp. And my instructor kept saying, he's like, you have a drinking problem. I'm like, fuck you. What is your problem? Just yell at me and tell me to do, 15 push-ups and get out of my business, right? It's like, I can smell it on you. Every single time you walk in, you smell like an alcohol factory. Anyway, he kept after me. And finally, I'm like, all right, I'll try to stay sober for a day. And then a day went to 2 days and 3 days and 4 days. He ended up becoming my sponsor. And then I managed to stay sober for a year and a half, and that's where I came to terms with the fact that I had a severe eating disorder as well. I have it all. I mean, you put a box of hair right here, I will get addicted to it. I swear. Okay? Or eat it. So the eating disorder took me out because I was gaining weight. Once you get sober and you're taking a bunch of like Ritalin all the time, and you stop taking the Ritalin and you put weight on. So I was putting all the weight on. I'm like, I can't have this. I live in Hollywood, California. It's like, no way, right? So I relapsed on pills and alcohol to lose weight again, and I was off and running. I managed to amass a pretty significant client base of mainly R&B artists and celebrities. So I was traveling with them quite frequently. My eating disorder was at its all-time high, like horrible eating disorder. What it was a binge eating disorder and exercise bulimia. So I would binge, and then I would exercise the next day for about 6 hours a day. And I was a personal trainer at this time now because I had changed careers. So, I was just working out all the time. And I was in New York City with a client, and I was miserable, depressed, and could not manage my eating disorder anymore. And I decided I was not suitable to live on the planet the way I was at. So I had a bunch of pills. I believe at the time it was the same concoction. I know there was Ritalin, there was opiates, there was benzos, there was Ambien. So I threw down whatever I had, and I drank on top of it. And I get a knocking on the door, like at 3 o'clock. They're screaming at me, like, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you. I wake up, urine all over the bed, donuts and pizza smashed all over me. The mini bar was destroyed. Like, it looked like a football team had come through there. The only thing I can think of was that what happened was I binged myself out of my overdose. I don't know how else I survived my overdose, but other than the food, because I clearly ate a shit ton. I had to pay for the room. I had to pay for the damages of the room. I damaged the room pretty good. Don't know what went on in there. So that was 7 years ago. I told them, I'm like, hey, just fly me home. I didn't open the door. I'm like, fly me home. I got an emergency in LA. They still to this day don't know what happened. And I admitted myself to treatment a little bit over 7 years ago. It was a dual diagnosis treatment center in Arizona called Rosewood. And I was in there for depression, eating disorder, and substance abuse. Worst experience of my life, coming off of trying to get rid of all of those three things at the same time. They almost kicked me out because I was that much of a handful. I was just off my nut. So I met a girl in there, of course, in treatment. It's the best place to find a life partner. I walk up to her, and the thing you do when you're in treatment, you're like, hey, how many times have you been in treatment? Oh, how many times have you been in treatment? It's like, stripes, right? So she's like, 26 times, not including 16 psychiatric stays. I'm like, oh my God, wife material. She gets me, right? So of course, what do? We move in together afterwards. She ends up relapsing hardcore on her eating disorder. She was extreme bulimic anorexic. We ended up getting a dog. The dog's like part of my story. What happened was, after I got out of treatment, I didn't know how to function. I didn't know how to function without the eating disorder, without my drugs, alcohol. Like, I always had one or the other. So I basically laid on the couch, I laid on the couch, unable to move in a severe depressive episode for 5 months. I watched nothing but Law & Order SVU and Forensic Files. And that's all I could do. I couldn't wash a dish, I couldn't do laundry, I couldn't open a piece of mail. She's in and out of psychiatric institutions all the time. She's like, so I think it's time for you to go to UCLA psychiatric ward. And I'm like, no. She's like, well, doesn't it kind of sound nice? They bring your food for you, you get coffee. I'm like, okay, all right. Anyway, I was admitted to the UCLA psych ward to manage my depression. And I did it to save my sobriety, because this is the longest period of sobriety I've ever had. In there's a woman in there, a young girl, and her mom owned a dog foundation. And she had some flyers with her for some reason. And there was this one flyer of this dog, and it said lesbians only, because the dog kept biting dudes. Yeah, he was returned to the foundation like 5 times because he kept biting the men, So I was like, perfect. Go hand in hand. I'm not a man hater, okay? So she's like, no, you cannot get the dog. You can't take care of yourself. I'm like, okay. 3 days later, she goes in the psych ward. She goes into Cedars-Sinai psych. I'm like, I'm getting this dog now. So I went and got the dog when she was in the psych ward. She gets out. She's like, you need to return the dog. I'm like, look, if you're giving me an ultimatum between you and the dog, it's going to be you going. So we ended up breaking up. I had spent all my money on treatment because insurance sucks. And I ended up living out of my car with my dog. And I ended up getting a little job at the time, and it was a really humbling experience. I worked at a gym, basically picking up weights off the floor, and this is coming from somebody where I was traveling the world with clients and making ridiculous amounts of money, staying in the nicest hotels all over the place, and here I am making minimum wage, picking up weights off the floor. So I kept the car underneath the grounds, underneath the underground parking lot, and I had Rufus in the car. His name's Rufus. And I would sleep down there with Rufus, and then I'd come down and I'd shower at the gym, and then come down and walk him on my breaks and stuff. So that's kind of how I put my life back together. And then I just kind of grew, obviously little by little I started putting my life back together, amassing a little bit more money. I ended up having to file bankruptcy. The journey for the last 7 years has been a complete and total growth experience. I've grown up considerably. Now, as far as my mental illness is concerned, like I said, many, many years, every doctor has diagnosed me bipolar. And I'm like, absolutely not. I am not bipolar. And so finally, I came to terms with it recently, 3 years ago. I went to my last doctor's like, you're bipolar. I'm like, I'm not bipolar. I'm not. I'm just depressed. I went to another doctor who's like the guru of bipolar. I'm like, I didn't know this at the time. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna tell her how I'm feeling and see what she says. I'm not gonna tell her what the doctors have all told me, right? She's like, you're bipolar 2. And I'm like, bipolar 2. I'm like, okay, I didn't know that there was a bipolar 1 and 2 and 3, or 4 different stages of bipolar. I'm like, oh, all right. And she told me the symptoms of that, of bipolar 2. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that actually fits. That actually makes sense. I'm like, because I don't have the crazy manias, where you're off running and where you think you're Jesus and stuff like that. I don't have that. I have the hypomanic episodes. And what that looks like for me is one morning I woke up. This is before I was properly medicated. And I decided I needed to buy a motorcycle. Thought that was a really great idea. I live in LA. Motorcycles in LA are not a good idea. I go down to Harley Davidson with $5,000. I'm like, I want to buy a used bike. He's like, no, let's get you financed. We'll get you a nicer bike. I'm like, okay. He's like, you're financed for $20,000. I'm like, yes, let's get this $20,000 bike. It's like $400 a month. I'm like, perfect. I sit on it. I can't even put my feet on the ground. I can't ride it. I don't even test ride it. I'm like, I'll take it. Great idea. Sign the paperwork. At this point, I'm in a blackout. Basically, I'm signing the paperwork. I don't remember signing the paperwork. I know I must have signed paperwork. I don't remember. As soon as I step off the lot, it all come crashing down. I realized what I had done. I go home and laid in bed, canceled my clients for 2 days, and just laid there. I could not move and could not function. I call my dad, who's an attorney. Like, this is what happened. He's like, you're an idiot, but this is how you're going to get out of it. He's like, did you ever test drive the motorcycle? I said, no. He's like, you never took it off the lot? I'm like, no. He's like, then you can get out of it because you never took possession of it. I'm like, great. So I ended up getting out of that deal. But that's kind of that's how my hypomania looks. It's just extremely high, impulsive, ridiculous things that I do. And it's just very short. And then I'm in a severe depressive state for days, for weeks, for however long, sometimes months. So anyway, I finally get on medication, this proper medication, about 3 years ago now, and my life completely changed. I've never been more stable. I don't have those impulse control issues anymore. I still deal with depressive episodes for sure. It's not 100% gone, but the hypomanic episodes that were kind of like screwing my life up a little bit, I don't have those at all anymore. And that's why I started Tangible Movement, was because, oh, and one other thing, my mom, something wrong with her. We just never knew what it was. She's also been on all sorts of medications all of her life. She's a hoarder. And I was going through her hoard because I had to move her to Victorville because I had to help their rent. And it's cheaper out there. I found this old prescription from 1985 for lithium. I'm like, Mom, what is this? I'm like, are you bipolar? She's like, yeah, the doctors always said I was bipolar, but your father would never let me take the medication. I was like, oh my God. If only my life would have been so different. Also, when I would go see the doctors, my dad would not allow the insurance to be billed because he didn't want anybody to know. So I had to pay cash. We had to pay cash for the therapy and for all the psychiatric treatments I would go through because he was embarrassed by it. And he thought like his lawyer friends or whatever were going to find out through our medical records. I don't know what he was thinking, but so my mom is mentally ill. I'm mentally ill. But yeah, I have to say that my life today is, normal. I never really had a normal life. I'm sober. I've been abstinent from my eating disorder for 7 years. I have a great life as far as, my job is concerned. As far as my little dog, I love my dog. I still have him. But yeah, that is mental illness in a nutshell as far as what my journey has been. And it could have all been changed. The trajectory of my life could have been changed had I accepted the fact that I was severely mentally ill at a younger age. And I had supportive parents and a therapist who didn't say, forget about your gay issues. So it's important what you guys say to your patients, and it's important what you hear from them. That's the most important thing, is to listen. But that's all I have as far as my story is concerned. I'll go ahead and open it up for questions and answers at this time. Thank you very much.
Any resources you would recommend as far as the gender identity issues? I have a few clients, and I know that's something I need to grow in,
right,
and becoming more knowledgeable about. So if there's any place you can direct me to.
Sure, and I struggled with that deeply. I actually was considering transitioning. That's another issue for me too, but this is really horrible to say, but the vanity issue living where I live, I didn't want to be a 5'5" dude. So that was kind of one of the main reasons, and the cost. That I was like, okay, I'm just going to stay a female. I don't want to be a short guy. Like, short guys kind of have a rough time in life, So I've already had my rough time. I don't need any more. The LGBT Center in West Hollywood, phenomenal resource. Please reach out to them. They are I would say the litmus for gender identity, and they have a phenomenal program. Major, yeah. And if you want, I can give you the information afterwards. Yeah.
You're great.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And I would like to say, I've gone through pretty much what you've gone through. Mine has been physical and emotional, clinical. And I would like to just do what you're doing. And hopefully anybody don't get angry about what I'm about to say. But the Afro-American community doesn't want to seek help.
I know.
And so I would like to just be able, if anybody would listen to me, do what you're doing, because it's needed.
Yep. Most of my clients are African American.
Mm-hmm. And so, but I worked in mental health, and mental health actually saved my life because I worked there and I got the information. If I had not received the information, I would not be doing as good as I'm doing now. So I thank God for Dr. Edwards. I just need to go back and tell him that. And I would like to do what you're doing. So if there's any information, I have tons of information, but I don't know.
Absolutely, we can talk afterwards for sure. But most of my clients are African American, and I have, of course, when you're training somebody, you become it's almost like a therapy session, right? I have encouraged many of them to seek treatment, and they're like, no, you don't understand, Torri. You're white, okay? I'm black, and in my community, it's Jesus. Jesus is the one that is going to save me. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay, all right. But some of them did go ahead and seek treatment. And it was life-changing for them. And one of them actually is an outspoken advocate now. I can give you her information. She's a singer. She's a pretty well-known singer. And she's speaking publicly about her journey now. Yeah.
Thank you.
I do. I'm the oldest of 4. So my sister Ashley lives in London. She's 30, well, I'll be 40 this year, so she's 38. I have a sister Chanel who is 29 and a brother who's 25, all from the same parents. My sister Ashley, the one near me, suffers from depression, just regular depression. Chanel had an eating disorder. She's 5'1", used to weigh 280 pounds. She recently had gastric bypass surgery, and it's completely changed her life. And so she's on medication, and she's exercising for the first time ever. So she's working on herself right now too. Brandon is the only one who seems to be okay, who doesn't have any disorders.
Do you support the children?
With Chanel, yes. Me and my sister Ashley had a falling out about a year ago regarding my parents, and so I haven't spoken to her recently, but we used to. Yeah, we used to talk about it. So me and Chanel, the one who lost all the weight, we talk regularly, yes.
You still have contact with your father?
Oh, yeah. My dad, once I started working with the African American community as far as the R&B artists and the rap artists that I work with, and this is going to sound horrible, like I said, but I'm just repeating what he says. And he saw I was making a good amount of money. He's like, oh, okay, so black people do know how to pay bills. And I'm like, Dad, really? And I'm like, yeah. And then he started coming around. And one of my clients is a R&B artist, and I traveled with him on 4 different tours. He's like, can I get a shirt, a t-shirt, like a merch shirt? I'm like, sure. So he's all about it now. He's completely done a 180, which is really crazy. He's also finally come to terms with my sexuality, and he'll ask questions like, do you have any girlfriends? Are you dating now? Who are you dating? So he's done but he's also in really poor health. He's got Parkinson's, type 2 diabetes, and he can barely walk without a walker. So I think his illness has sensitized him a little bit, but he's definitely done a complete and total 180. We have a great relationship. Yeah.
Jeanette, did you do the genetic test to figure out the right cocktail for you?
She did some testing, yeah. Yes, yep, she did that.
Is that when it totally changed with the meds?
With her, yes. I'm free to tell you what medications I'm on if you're interested. I'm on lithium, Wellbutrin. It was Prozac, but Prozac was putting me to sleep. And Abilify. I also, of course, I had a thyroid problem, and the lithium just made it worse. So I'm also on thyroid medication. And I was taking a T3 supplement for a minute too, because apparently that has an off-label use to elevate symptoms of depression. So I was taking that for a minute as well, but that's my cocktail now, yeah.
But it was the genetic testing that they finally figured out.
Yeah, that she figured out that I forget what it was, that I don't metabolize medication well, and a few other things, and she's brilliant. She rambled off a bunch of blah, 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 technical stuff. I don't know what she was saying. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm like, just give me what is going to work, okay? But yes, to answer your question, yes, and that was the first doctor that's ever done that. This doctor, she's been on the doctor. She's written some books. She's really, really knowledgeable. Really knows her stuff. So yeah, I guess if you're a clinician or a psychiatrist or a therapist and you want to figure out, then yeah, do that, because that's what she did with me, and it seemed to work. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
What were your experiences like being hospitalized in psychiatric hospitals?
I had a horrible experience when I was 15. I was nearly raped. A woman came across my hall and was trying to rape me in there, and a nurse came in So that was horrible. Oh yeah, and I have been raped before as well. It was a relationship of mine. I was raped by a female, so that didn't really help my situation very much either. But when I was 17, I don't really remember a lot of it. I just remember watching the O.J. Simpson trial. And that was like, I don't remember much else while we're in there. And then Rosewood was great. That was the most recent treatment center. It was. I mean, I hated it because I was coming off of all the stuff and I was detoxing, and the detox process was absolute torture, coming off the benzos and the opiates and all that kind of stuff. But they had a really good program, for sure. And I did their hospitalization program, their PHP, and then their IOP in Santa Monica. So yeah, to answer your question, Rosewood was I'd recommend that place. Yeah.
Very personal question.
Sure.
But you've been very open.
Absolutely. Anything.
And I really appreciate it. I work with several people who are gay and one transgender who identifies as male. So my question to you, and he is in a relationship with a female.
Okay.
And he does not identify himself as being gay because he says, since I was 4 years old, I have felt male.
Yeah.
So I think I heard you identify as gay.
Yeah, gay.
And do you, but you identify as female?
Yes. My pronouns are her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that your gender?
Yes, I'm female. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm cis, whatever. I was born female. Yes.
Okay. Because I thought you were implying maybe something about transitioning.
Oh, I thought about transitioning female to male.
Yes.
I thought about transitioning to male, but I decided against. I decided not to. But yes, I am born female. Yes.
Do you identify as transgender?
For a minute, I identified on the spectrum. I did. I felt like I was on the spectrum, and I felt a little bit more male. But I'm a little bit older, so I'm kind of more used to like cut and dry. Like you're either gay or you're straight, right? Yeah. You're a lesbian or you're a gay man. So I just kind of I was like, you know what? I'm gay. I have a vagina. That makes me a woman. So I'm a girl. So that I just kind of simplified it for myself rather than having to explain all the new things that are out there. I still don't even know all the new terminology. The non-binary, the queer something, genderqueer. I was swiping with somebody. I swiped and the individual looked like a male, identified as genderqueer. I'm like, okay, what is genderqueer? It's like, Google it. So I'm like, all right, I Googled. And it's like, yeah, we can hook up, da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry to put this out there. I'm like, but I kind of need to know if you have a penis or a vagina. If you're asking for a hookup, it was just being really evasive about it, I'm like, I don't care what you identify as, but if I'm going to hook up with you, then I need to know what you're packing down there, you know what I mean? Anyway, it was like, you're a homophobe and blah, 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 unmatched. And I got unmatched. Not that I was going to hook up with this person anyway. I was just really curious about what this genderqueer thing is, yeah? Because it didn't have a gender. So I was just like, yeah, okay. I'm gay, I'm a female, I date women. I no longer identify on the spectrum of trans. I would prefer to be called handsome versus beautiful though, so small things like that, so yeah.
As long as you're comfortable.
Yes.
Good.
I don't know if I answered your question.
You did.
Okay.
And thank you for your openness.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
And that's one thing I'm trying to work through now. I have a client right now who, on our form, I work in vocational rehab, but we have a form. So identifying as gender, male, female, or we have an option does not identify.
Yes.
And so this individual said does not identify. And so I'm struggling with
Pronouns.
how to document, how to interact with.
Just ask. The easiest thing you can do and the least offensive thing you can possibly do right off the bat is what pronouns do you identify? Which pronouns do you prefer that I use? That's a very gentle way of saying hey, help me out here basically. But yeah, don't ever assume. And if you're a clinician, and you have like a front desk people, it's the auxiliary individuals, it's really important that you have them trained as well. So if somebody comes in and they see what they see as a male, you know, or they're just going to make assumptions in their head. Just train them to be neutral and to automatically just ask, what pronouns do you prefer? For everybody. It just will eliminate any kind of, you know, ill feeling from the patient as they walk in the office.
When you say that, are there some people out there that you would assume what pronouns do you use and they may take offense to that?
Yes, 100%.
Do you find yourself even walking on thin ice with whether you offend somebody? I would hate to offend somebody, and I just don't know. Do you feel the same way?
It's always advisable, like when someone's talking to me, like just if they ask you what pronouns do you use, I'm fully happy to be like her.
Right. But
yeah.
what if they're not?
If they're just like a regular person,
Right. If there's in your and then
they
all of a sudden they're like,
they shouldn't get their panties in a bunch. I mean, if they're a man and they have a penis and they're like born that way, then he'll say he. You know, like it's. I really don't think that a man is going to get, or a woman either way, is going to get offended by simply asking what they prefer to be what pronouns they prefer. Yeah, I mean, it's just that's the safest way to go around it.
right. As a nurse, I did that one time, and he looked. He goes, "Where did that come from?" And I think he was clueless. He was older. I think he was
Ignorant.
clueless.
Yeah, a little ignorant.
I don't think he realized that
Yeah.
he may have been somewhere in between, and I don't think he acknowledged where he was at. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. 100%. Yeah, and you're going to have that too, but it's a safer bet to go and just simply ask. Yeah.
I'm a clinician and I'm a mother, but I have a daughter not exactly, she's not gay, but she went through all the depression what you have experienced. What can you share with me and other people? Sometimes I have such a difficult time dealing with my daughter.
Yeah, I get it.
I don't know what to do. So that's why I'm ending up doing this job. Well, I like it, but at the same time I'm helping her how to deal with it.
I mean, I would just let her know that you're 100% there for her, no matter what. And she's going to be difficult. How old is she?
28.
Still, like if she's dealing with issues, like still dealing with a family or a close personal, you know, family member, there's going to be a lot of difficulty there. But the best thing and the only thing you should be doing, look, I'm here for you no matter what. If you ever want to talk, please talk to me, or just ask her how she's feeling. Like, how are you feeling? Like, what's going on in your life? Just ask open-ended questions like that, and see what she comes to. But if she's 28, she's grown. Like I said, the only thing that you can do is to just on a regular basis, let her know you are available for her at any time, no matter what. That's the best advice I can give.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for speaking up.
Oh, you're welcome.
Being a role model
Yes.
for doing this.
You're very welcome.
It's very brief.
Yeah.
And we have room for one more question. Yep.
I'd like to know, now you said that your father was pretty conservative, pretty devout in his religion. We're all in the Deep South. We're in the Bible Belt.
Yes.
So how, from your perspective, how do we address the role of religion on mental illness? Not just, I know we've been talking a lot about your sexuality, but mental illness. How, from your perspective, how do we bridge that gap?
So this is kind of what I say to people who have a really staunch religious belief and struggle with the mental illness, especially the medication aspect of it with the whole Jesus thing. So Jesus gives you, if there's like a body of water you got to cross, right? Jesus is going to give you the boat. So you got the boat from Jesus. The oars to make you move, that's the medication and the mental health aspect of it. That's the therapy. They go hand in hand. One does not oppose the other. That's the only thing the best piece of advice I can give to somebody to help conceptualize the fact that you can have religion with science and with medication. It just depends on how devout they are. They still might have it completely ingrained in their brain, like, no, the Lord's going to save me. The Lord's going to save me. But you can just be like, look, the Lord's going to give you a vessel. I'm going to give you the tools in order for you to move that vessel. And that is the medication and the therapy. I don't know if that makes any sense or if that will help you at all, but that's the way I would explain it.
No, thank you. I just wanted like that perspective because, like I said, we are in the Bible Belt, so we tend to have our Bible Belt perspective on mental illness. So outside of the Bible Belt, just what is that perspective?
I mean, it's basically just therapy and medication. Like all my friends are in therapy. We all talk, what did you talk about your therapist today? Like, what did you talk about, Like, whoa, we went over that topic? Did you talk about this? So we are really open. We're in LA about our therapy sessions and stuff like that, whereas I know in the Bible Belt, it's like a completely different situation, especially in the Black community. So ease into it, basically. Ease into it. Don't force it. Allow the option to be present and let them know that they have that option.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was a pleasure seeing you guys. If you guys feel like you need to get rid of some money in your wallet, feel free to visit tangiblemovement.org and make a donation. And you guys, my information is on the brochures on the website. So if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to email me. Also, if you have anything that you think I would be good at a speaking engagement, if you would like me to come speak to your staff at your clinic or your school or your job or whatever, please let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.